everybody, I'm Rebecca Coles, and this is Rebecca's Garden on DVD. We've put together some of the best stories that we've had over the years to bring you this collection of getting started in your garden. Hopefully it's going to help you and inspire you, and you'll enjoy getting those hands dirty. And if you like this DVD, you'll like the others that we have in the collection as well, including one on roses, flowers, gardening in the summer, gardening in the fall, and look for our holiday edition. Hope you enjoy the show, and until next time, keep those hands dirty.
I like the look of clay pots, but let's face it, sometimes they can be a little heavy. Ha ha! Fooled ya. Pots have come a long way. It used to be that we had choices of plastic or clay. Well, now there are new containers that combine the best qualities of both. Now let's start with the plastic. They come in a wide variety of colors and different sizes and shapes. They are very lightweight. They retain the moisture well so you don't have to water so often, and we can leave these outdoors during the winter months. The only problem is they don't look like the real thing. For that, we need the clay. Of course, this is very natural, looks very nice, but let's face it, it's very heavy, and you cannot leave these out in colder climates, otherwise they'll crack or chip. And then we have the new kid on the block. These new pots made with polyurethane, which means they're heat resistant, cold resistant. You can keep these out in the winter. They're lightweight, as you saw. And take a look at this. It looks like the real thing. And the best part, I think you'll be surprised to find just how many different shapes, colors, and sizes you have to pick from. So as you can see, there are lots of pots to pick from. There is one catch with these polyurethane containers, and that is that they have no drainage holes already drilled. So what you'll have to do is flip it over. Usually it's already marked, but be sure to give it some drainage holes. That way you'll have a happy, healthy plant that won't be flooded by water. If you're going to be heading out to the garden center looking for pots for your plants, you'll soon find you're faced with two choices, typically plastic or clay. Which one do you choose? There are pros and cons with each. Well, let me start off with plastic. First of all, plastic is lighter weight, typically less expensive. But the biggest advantage about plastic is that you don't have to water the plant as much because the plastic does not absorb any of the water. That's very important if you're on a real tight schedule. Now, the one disadvantage with plastic is that there's not a lot of shapes to pick from. People complain because it doesn't look that natural, but as you can see, they're getting close. Terracotta and clay pots, on the other hand, come in all shapes, sizes, and colors, plus they have a more natural look. You will have to spend a little more money, and they are a little heavier. Now, the one concern about a clay pot is that because it's so porous, it pulls moisture away from the plant. Important point, because that means you're going to have to water this much more than, say, a plant that's planted in a plastic container. And one final tip with the terracotta or clay pots, if you live in a climate where temperatures drop below 32 degrees, it's important to bring your pots indoors during the winter season. Otherwise, the water trapped inside the clay will expand when it freezes. That will cause the pot to crack or to crumble. It'll have to be replaced. Now, whether you choose clay or plastic, the one thing you have to make sure, and that is that the pot has good drainage. Planting in pots has become quite popular, and for some people, the bigger the better. The only problem is when you start filling this up with soil and water, it can become quite heavy. And when you think about it, most of the plants that go in pots don't need all this soil. So the key is to reduce the depth by adding filler. Coffee cans are great for taking up space in the bottom of your pot. So are milk jugs, and what about all those plastic plant pots you have laying around? My favorite are styrofoam peanuts. These are great as long as they're not biodegradable. Now for this container, I'm going to invert a plastic pot, but you can see we've got a lot of space here. I'll fill that space up with these plastic packing peanuts. Next, we'll add landscape fabric on top of the filler. This will prevent the soil from mixing with the plastic peanuts while allowing the water to drain from the soil. And now we're ready for the soil, and you can see we've reduced the amount we need by nearly 50%. I prefer to use a soilless mixture or something high in peat. This will help retain the moisture. Now we're ready to pack the flowers in. And remember, because we reduce the soil, this pot is going to dry out quickly. So you're going to have to check it every day to see if it needs water. Also, because we're leaching out nutrients, it does need fertilizer every 1 to 2 weeks, or use a time-release fertilizer that will last all summer long. Having sick plants is no picnic, but if you know how to diagnose the problem, you can nurse them back to health. Here are some common problems that people see with their houseplants. First of all, this ficus. The leaves are falling, they're brown, they're yellow. The problem? Not enough water. Ficus really likes consistent watering. I find at home that if I water mine once a week, that's usually enough. This cactus, on the other hand, has been killed with kindness. Too much water. Cactus doesn't need a lot of water. In fact, sometimes you can go a month without watering. Now, it'd be a shame to lose this beautiful ivy topiary, but it's going down. The leaf color is not as green as it should be. The leaves are very small, and if you look closely, we can see pink veins that are starting to become visible. The problem? This has a nutrient deficiency. It needs fertilizer. Houseplants should be fertilized about once a month. And also, this has a lot of greenery, but look at the pot and look at the bottom. The roots are coming through. This is root bound. It needs a bigger pot in order to continue growing well. This Dracaena spike has a lot of spots. This is a very common problem on houseplants. It's called rust. Now, it's not going to kill the plant, but if you want to prevent the rust from moving on to the new foliage, then spray the plant with a fungicide. So there you have it, a couple of common houseplant problems that won't kill your plant as long as you know what to look for and you know how to treat it. Then you can be the plant doctor. If you're looking for ways to add punch to your window box, get ready. We'll show you great combinations that grow beyond the box. Forget the traditional petunias, geraniums, and impatiens. We've found new and exciting plant partners that offer unconventional blooms with a view. Now, before you get started, there's a couple things you need to think about. First of all, where will your box hang? Is it going to be in the sun or in the shade? That's going to determine what kind of plants you need. You don't want to mix sun-loving plants with shade-loving plants. Also, how will you view the box? From inside, from outside, from both sides? That will determine the placement. And finally, don't forget you need 3 types of plants. Some that grow vertically, some that will fill in, and others that will trail. Some of the most beautiful and dramatic window boxes I've seen come from designer Scott Indrace from Highland Nursery in St. Paul, Minnesota. One look at his containers and it's obvious. He's got the knockout touch when it comes to mixing unique flowers and foliage. Well, here's just a few examples of what Scott has done. I got to tell you, this is really, really nice. It's so different and refreshing.
Well, thank you.
Tell me what you've done here.
Well, in this box, we just used a plain old weathered cedar box that you typically find on a cottage or a small garage or something. And we mixed different things, including different grasses like this purple fountain grass and the sweet flag. It's a dwarf version, which is a little bit more unusual than the other types, as well as just geraniums, but unusual leaf forms of geraniums. Also herbs and the perennial creeping jenny will add a great trailing addition to that box.
Now this is a tin box. I like the
tin box with the dragonfly motif, but again, we use things that you typically wouldn't find in a container, or a planter box for that matter. The mother-lode juniper, a great chartreuse texture and color. Blue oatgrass here is a great perennial addition, and the cathedral window heuchera, a perennial that you wouldn't put in a planter box typically. Texture is one of the critical elements of this particular design because we're looking at the color green virtually throughout the entire thing. So we have to realize the subtle differences in texture of the hens and chicks and the sedums. And also this cactus adds a nice focal area.
This box of cacti needs a sunny location, but for a shady window, check out this hay rack filled with caladium bulbs. These add wonderful height and texture, and here's a great idea. Scott combined them with houseplants like ferns and spider plants, and the best part, this is very easy to plant. Obviously, the first element we need is this wire cage.
This is English hay rack.
Okay, what do we need to do first?
Well, with the English hay rack, what we need to do with it initially is to line it with plastic.
Bubble wrap works great for this. The backside should be completely covered. This will protect the siding of the house. Staple it to hold it in place and leave the front of the rack open. This will allow you to tuck in plants so they can trail out. Next, add a good potting soil about halfway. Then you'll need hydrated sphagnum moss. Stuff this in and around the wire on the outside of the basket.
So we're adding a little bit more soil now to get up to a new level.
Okay, now this is a special kind of soil that you like to use.
It's great because it's a type of soil that has the moisture holding polymers already mixed into it.
Okay, so it's like this soil moist, but it's already pre-mixed and measured. So.
Right, so it's easy to use. You don't have to worry about the proportion.
And that's really nice because then you don't have to water so much. And if you're like me, you might forget, which you can't, and this kind of saves the day.
Exactly. It's an insurance policy on those really hot days.
Now we're ready to plant. Start by tucking trailing plants through the wire on the outside. Grasses like sedges work great for this. Then add uprights like the aluminum houseplant or plumosa fern. Next, the focal point of the box, the caladium. The huge leaves add various colors and leaf texture.
That's perfect.
Then add more trailers like creeping jenny. This can be poked right through the moss and will contrast nicely with the other plants.
We're kind of adding the final ingredient, which is the filler. And the filler in this case is the flowers, which is kind of unusual. Yeah. But the filler is these beautiful dwarf impatiens, which kind of peek up in and around the plants themselves. Another thing that I like to do is to tuck in a few nasturtium seeds into a container like this. So just tuck those in the front, and those will cascade down. What's nice about nasturtiums is they germinate within a week to 10 days, so you're not waiting forever for the effect.
So as you can see, it's very easy to get creative with your window boxes. You just have to think out of the box. And keep in mind, if you're using perennials or conifers in your planters and you live in a cold climate, you need to replant them in your garden before winter sets in. I love the winter season. The only drawback is that it can leave our landscape looking a little barren. Well, there's no reason your urns have to look like this. In fact, I'm going to show you how you can add greenery to add warmth and color to your house. There's many different types of greenery you can use for decorating. Holly is real popular, especially around the holiday season. What makes it nice, it has glossy green leaves, it comes variegated, and if you are going to be using holly, make sure you use gloves because it's rather prickly. The one thing you do need to know is that if you live in the northern climate, say in the northern section of the country, you probably don't want to use this outdoors because where it gets cold, that will cause the leaves to turn black. Some other popular choices include spruce tops, which are nothing more than the tops of small trees. When massed together in window boxes or pots, they look fabulous. Spruce tops are great for adding height, but if you want a softer, cascading look, check out balsam fir. Not only does it look good, it smells great. White pine cuttings have longer needles and work well either standing or draped over a pot. Now planting's the easy part. Just remove all the dead plant material and then start inserting the greenery. Now, don't these look great? And it was hardly any effort at all. To keep them in place, go ahead and water them. The water will freeze and they'll stay in place until next spring when we can plant something else. Who needs a garden when you can have pots filled with flowers spilling over the edges? With new and trendy choices, container gardening is bigger than ever. We've come a long way since the days of just geraniums and petunias, and no one knows that better than Matt Phillips of Black's Nursery in Afton, Minnesota. He thinks, well, out of the pot, so to speak, using unusual combinations to create pots with pizzazz. Matt is a master at designing his arrangements around his pot, and I think that's the biggest mistake people make. They think that pots are kind of like a pair of jeans. Anything we put on top is going to look good, but that's simply not the case.
No, especially with a pot like this shiny green. I thought maybe we should just do this all green. And we used the nice silver lotus vine, the nice verbena with the green centers, the arctotis. I think it's going to be really beautiful as it grows out.
Well, and it makes it one unit. It really is pleasing to the eye.
Here we have a great big fun copper pot. It's a great big copper boiler, and this had so much going on, I thought, with the beautiful copper and bronze tones and the slight patina it has already, and so we blended a bunch of nice gray to pick up the patina and the beautiful color of this heuchera and the sedum.
Well, this looks like a miniature landscape. It's really pretty. The colors you used are nice, warm, and kind of bronzy feeling. This is really nice, and I like the blue oak grass. Now, in this pot, you broke all the rules.
Oh, yeah, we went the other way on this blue. We thought we couldn't really match flowers to this, so we thought maybe we should just go the other way. Some greens and chartreuse, the bright daisies, the sweet potato vine. dangling over the blue pots. You can see the blue through the flowers, but
it's a beautiful contrast. It really works. So some tips here. If you have a pot, bring it with you when you go shopping.
Yeah, you can
and
do that.
I notice with your pots, you don't put the tallest thing in the center. You set it off and do a lot of asymmetrical designing.
Yeah, it can be fun. Be creative with the pots.
So with those ideas in mind, it was off to do some power shopping so I could create a pot of my own.
Perfect.
So let's put Matt's advice to work. I found myself a container. This is nothing more than a beehive that I found at an antique store. And if you look carefully at the color here, you can see we have some blue greens, some peachy salmon colors, pastels, and some blues and purples that seem to come into play here. So based on that, I went to the nursery, and here's the collection of plants I came up with. To complement the blue-green colors, I've got this beautiful Heliochrysum, lotus vine, and this blue oatgrass. For purples, there's all kinds of colors, but these are the soft purples. We have brachycomb, spiderwort, some verbena, and then for yellows, I've got this incarvilla, and notice how the vinca vine picks up the incarvilla. This will cascade over, so these two work nicely together. And for the salmon, I found this beautiful verbena. You can see how we're kind of keeping the flow here. It's all going to come together when we put it in the pot. So let's get the pot filled. We're going to fill it about a quarter full with potting soil.
Matt suggests a potting soil that is fairly light, but he also insists that plants will do better with a little garden soil thrown in. My addition to the recipe? These water polymers called Soil Moist. They help the plants thrive on those hot summer days. I like to moisten the polymers first before I add them to the soil. Then finish filling the containers halfway.
Okay, now we're ready to add the plants, and for this step we really want to pack in the plants so we get this beautiful dramatic display. So you ready to get those hands dirty again?
I always like to start with the tallest plant first, like this blue oatgrass. And just remember, it doesn't always have to go in the center. Like Matt says, think asymmetrically. Then just start packing in your annuals, mixing colors and textures as you go. And just be sure to keep the trailing plants to the outside edge.
Okay, it looks like that's about done. Now, you may need to add a little soil to fill in the holes around the plants. Then just keep this watered, and don't forget, it's going to need to be fed about once a week with a water-soluble fertilizer. I like to use it about 50% strength. The flowers are going to continue blooming and growing. This looks great now, but wait till it takes off.
Has your garden gone to pot? Well, if so, you're not alone. All over the country, cool containers are being used to create gorgeous gardens. And there's no better place to find examples of this than at the Denver Botanical Gardens. Pots are purposely planted throughout the place to produce a parade of floral fantasies.
This is a South African garden, and this is a great example where you can use one color to be the focal point in the garden. Here the pot is more the emphasis in the plants at times, especially in the wintertime. And we decided to use 20 blue pots initially to pick up the blue in the tile of the pool. Well, 20 grew into 100.
And it looks fabulous. It has such a nice cooling effect here.
By transforming the cool blue pots into cool blue water, a whole new effect can be created. Using your pots to create a colorful collection is just one of the many concepts found here in the gardens.
Here's a great example of how you can carry your water theme into a pot. You plug the pot, you add water, and you put your aquatic plant in.
That is lovely, a great idea, and I love the fact that these are plants that don't need watering.
Well, you do have to water the pot.
Oh.
The aquatic garden crowds massive groupings together for a dramatic effect. Water hyacinth, papyrus, and water cannas add color, while a variety of grasses such as corkscrew rush and taro heighten interest. Plants like the variegated water carrot send shoots over the sides for spillage. From moist and wet to hot and dry, our tour took us to these drought-tolerant vistas, which house succulents, cacti, and yucca. Another vignette places hardy ice plants in half-buried pots poised for perfection. And then there's the pot of poison, with its devilish rich mix of chocolate coreopsis, a bold bounty of lion's ear, some cosmos, and the poisonous but beautiful castor bean, which can create a dramatic arrangement, but one you'll want to keep away from children and pets.
You don't have to be real extravagant when you plant a pot. You can do something very simple. Here we have a variegated ivy against a dark black pot, and it really shows up. And then for a little extra touch of parsley sticking out of the top.
This is beautiful for those who want an English feel, and without all the pomp and circumstance, this is really nice. Of course, if you're looking for English elegance, this bromeliad, centered between simple tree roses and surrounded by variegated thyme, will fill the bill. If your passion is pink, try planting Plectranthus, mixed with Kufia, Lavatera, and Verbena. If you prefer purple, Purple Coleus and Spike Dracaena will perform perfectly in pots. And finally, there's the monochromatic container, filled with variegated figs, bacopa, white flower and maple, and some mother-in-law's tongue. Well, the pots here are so spectacular that we decided to have Tracer show us some of his trade secrets. So show us how you pot up plants.
Well, first of all, we start out by selecting a pot. Since we like blue so much, I grabbed a blue pot. Then we fill it with soil. However, being such a big pot, I decided to take a 5-gallon container and turn it upside down to take up some volume, because we don't
put
need
it inside, put the soil. That's an excellent idea. Keeps it lighter too.
Then I get a nice soilless, light mix. We don't want to use peat moss because it tends to expand.
Do you mix in time-release fertilizer?
Yes, I'm mixing the Osmocote, which is a 14-14-14.
Okay. And then you bring in the plants.
You can do it however you think it works best.
But just pack them in.
Yes, we want root balls to the walls in these pots. Pack them full because you want them to look good immediately.
Do you have any philosophy when you do this? Is there what?
Well, I think of it like a happy meal. We have our bold foliage, that's our burger.
Okay.
We have our linear foliage, which is our French fries. We have our shake, which is our frothy, ferny material. And then we have our toy. And now it's going to be our spillage.
I'm out of here. I'm hungry. You know, I'm the garden maven. I've heard it all before. I don't have a backyard, but I'd love a garden. Well, you don't need a backyard to have a fabulous garden like a pizza garden. How about your own salsa garden or even a mixed vegetable garden? You can do it. You need a little bit of space of sunshine and a container, and you're set to go. The container I selected is a half whiskey barrel. This is really nice because I can get some good depth, and that's important because a lot of these plants will need to spread their roots. Whatever you buy, just make sure you get some good drainage holes at the bottom. Now you can see I've got one drilled out here. It's a little large and the soil no doubt will fall through. So I'm going to take some screening and just put that at the bottom, and then the soil will stay put. For the next step, we'll fill up the container with soil. Whatever you use, make sure it's a nice potting soil, something with a lot of peat. That way it'll help retain moisture so you don't have to water so much. Now the first garden is going to be my mixed vegetable garden. In it I'll plant some beets, carrots, radishes, and I thought pole beans would be nice. Of course, that will help give us some height, but we need something for the beans to grow on. So I've got 3 bamboo canes here, and I'll sink them into the soil and then tie them at the top. We're ready to plant the seeds. You can divide the barrel up if you'd like or make any kind of design, but for the beans you want to make sure you place them around the poles, that way they can run up the pole and give us a teepee effect. It's a good idea to plant about 2 to 3 beans around each pole. Now remember the rule when planting seeds. You want to bury them 2 to 3 times as deep as their diameter. So with the beets and radishes, we'll put them down about a ½ inch or so. With the carrot seeds, they're so tiny, we'll simply press them into the soil. Now here's a container you can have fun with. It's a pizza garden. Everything growing in here will fit on a pizza. Oregano, of course your patio tomatoes, a little basil, red peppers. We've planted some onions and you can see the points are up. We'll just cover these so the points just barely stick up. And now if I could just figure out how to grow a pepperoni, I'd be set. Now if you're looking to spice up your life, you just might like this garden. It's the salsa garden. I'm going to plant some parsley, of course cilantro, a lot of onions, hot peppers, and of course tomatoes. Once your barrels are planted, be sure to water the plants well, and you'll have to keep your eye on the water because this is going to dry out a lot quicker than if these plants were in the ground. And also, it's a good idea every few weeks to come in with a little fish emulsion or an organic fertilizer, scratch it into the soil, and your plants will just take off like there's no tomorrow. And in no time, you'll be able to make your menu right out of the barrel. There's no need to wait until spring to enjoy beautiful blooming bulbs. By planting now, you can see and smell spring even in the middle of winter. As you can see, this is a beautiful project that's easy to do, and it makes a great blooming gift. Here's what you need to get started. You need some terracotta pots that are plain. Also, you'll want to find saucers that will fit nicely like a lid over the top of the pot. Then you'll need acrylic paints, and I have found through experience, the richer the color, the better the project's going to look when you're finished, and then you need paintbrushes. Now I'm going to start off with cadmium red, and I'm going to put this right on a plate. That should be enough to get started. Okay, now we're ready to paint our pot and saucer. What you need to do is cover the entire outside of the terracotta pot and also the interior lip. Will go down about 1.5 inches, 2 inches. The saucer needs to be painted both inside and outside as well. So now we're ready to get painting. You don't want this on too thick, but you want enough so you can't see the terracotta under the paint. Now it's important to let the paint thoroughly dry. It will take anywhere from 15 minutes to 30 minutes. Now we're ready to marbleize the pot. This is the fun part, but you need to do this outside. So come on, let's go. Now the reason we're outside, we're using spray paint so we don't want to breathe in the vapors. And if you have a paint box, that's excellent. I've taken a bucket of water, it's cold water inside. With the gold metallic spray paint, I'm going to just simply lightly spray the top of the water. Now I'm spraying the surface of cold water that's in a bucket. I'm going to let that dry for about 2 seconds. Then I'm going to take my saucer and just dip it around, and look what happens here. Now this may take a couple of tries before you get the hang of it, so have plenty of pots to play with. Then let the pots dry. Now we're ready to assemble the gift. Now what I've done here is pre-measured enough soil to fill the pot, bringing it up to the bottom lip. Put that in a Ziploc bag and just stuff that inside the pot. And the reason we put it in a Ziploc bag is because we're giving this as a gift. We don't want a lot of soil to be falling out of the bottom. Plus, once we put the bulbs on top of the soil, if they're in contact, they'll start growing. We don't want that as well, or at least not right now. Once we get that stuffed in, then you'll take paper white bulbs, which you can pick up at the garden center. We're going to stuff as many as we can right on top of the plastic with the points looking up at you. Then take the saucer, put it over the top, and we need to secure this. You can use ribbon. I like to use raffia, and we'll just tie this up. Now you can leave the knot, you can make a bow. I like to do a little pom-pom where I've taken raffia and measured it out. It's all the same size. Slip it under the knot. Now we're just going to tie up the base and then give this a haircut and clean it up a bit. Now for the final touches, you want to make sure you make a card. Inside are the directions of how to grow your potted paradise. Now your gift is ready for your friends, and once they follow your directions, in 4 to 6 weeks they will have a blooming gift. They'll think good thoughts, and hopefully they'll think of you. So I bet you've taken down your summer baskets and stored them in the garage. Well, dig them out, because I'm going to show you how you can make beautiful hanging baskets even in the dead of winter. Now the nice thing about these winter baskets is that anything goes. The one I'm going to show you how to make today is this one, and the beauty of this is that most of the materials in this basket you probably already have in your backyard or somewhere in your home. You'll need a hanging basket with a liner, a variety of greenery, fruit. Here I'm going to use pomegranates, but you could use tangerines, apples, oranges. I'm going to use some dried leaves. You can buy these with glycerin on them in the floral or craft store. They'll last much longer. Some twigs, a candle and a hurricane lamp. We've added stone for stability. You'll need some grapevine, a few simple tools, and some raffia. Now the first step is to fill the basket with soil, but if you already have an old basket, just get rid of the dead geraniums and you're set to go. In this case, since this is empty, we're going to fill the basket to the top with just regular potting soil. Okay, now what we want to do is just take some grapevine, and notice I have 2 wreaths, 2 different sizes. We're going to put this right on top of the basket. Now this does a couple of things. It's going to allow us to poke the greenery in, and it will allow it to hang over while giving us height as well. So just put those on top, and in the center we'll place the candle. Now we're ready for the greens. Before you begin this step, it's a good idea to set the hanging basket inside a heavy clay pot. This will help raise it up and make it much easier to insert the greenery. Also, be sure to stabilize the grapevine by pinning it down with some thin wire stakes. Now you can start adding a variety of greens, starting from the bottom up. You may have to snip and prune along the way. Just make sure you weave the stems of the greenery through the grapevine so it's nice and secure. Now notice there are empty spaces here. This is the perfect opportunity to use your fruit, leaves, and twigs to fill them up. I'll start with the fruit, and all I'm going to do is take a hyacinth stick, or if you have sticks in the backyard, just use those, and we'll shish kebab the pomegranate. We'll cut down the stick and then just insert it into the wreath. Continue adding pomegranates, and keep in mind they look best in groups of 2 or 3. And don't forget to poke in some leaves and some sticks to give the hanging basket that natural touch. Finally, you can make a bow out of raffia by simply wrapping the wire around it. Then just insert it into the grapevine. All right, there you have it. Doesn't look so bad, does it? Now, the one thing you want to make sure you check is the stability of the candle. You can see this is still a little wobbly. We don't want that. So what I'm going to do is take some leftover sticks and just drive them right next to the glass, sticking them into the soil. And then on a really cold, chilly night, I'll add a little water to the soil. The stakes will freeze into the place. I'll cut them down. The candle will not be going anywhere. This is just one idea for a winter hanging basket. There are so many other things you can do. For example, for a more rustic look, try hanging the basket from a simple rope. Or for something a little fancier, hang your basket from a decorative ribbon and add some twinkling lights. The list for plant material is endless, as you can imagine. You can use berries, ornamental grasses, pine cones, even dried artichokes look great. Now, doesn't that look nice? And imagine what your guests will say when they see this. And remember, with the candle, you don't want to leave this lit unattended. And make sure you hang the basket at eye level so you can enjoy the foliage rather than the bottom of the basket. Through the window, you'll see your garden lives on, even in the dead of winter. Just because summer has fizzled away doesn't mean we have to sacrifice eye-popping color from our gardens or containers. In fact, today I'm going to show you how we can keep our pots looking great with fabulous color right until the first flakes fly. The first step, however, is to know which are the best flowers of the frost. Chrysanthemums are the backbone of any fall garden. They come in a variety of colors, shapes, and sizes. And don't forget to look up some of the new varieties, like this Belgium chrysanthemum. You can see it has very nice small flowers. It's loaded with flowers. This will be the last plant to drop in your fall garden, and it has a nice dome appearance. Of course, we can't forget asters. They come again in a wide variety of colors, mainly in the pastel range, and the foliage is nice and feathery, so it gives a nice airy look to any container or pot. There are some perennials that you probably wouldn't consider in a pot, but when you look at this face, how can you resist? This is Rudbeckia, and in your fall pot, this will shine, as well as the Autumn Joy sedum. And remember, with all the perennials, if we plant them in pot, and if you live in a colder climate, once the pot freezes, chances are good you're going to lose the plant, but I think the investment is worth it, don't you? Some other plants to consider. How about flowering kale and cabbage? The nice part about this, the color is so vivid, but as it gets colder, the color becomes more dramatic. And the best part, all of this is edible. You can take the leaves, steam them like spinach, although a little bitter, or just use them as a garnish for your fall table. We can't forget to talk about pansies and violas. They're very nice, low-growing flowers. But if you're looking for something to trail over the baskets or containers, why not English ivy? These are diehards in the fall garden. The best time to change over your pots is late summer. By then, most of the fall plant material is available, plus the plants in your pot, well, they're past peak, so they're starting to look a little sparse. They won't look any better. Hopefully they'll make it easier to pull everything out. I've removed all the plant material, and you'll also notice that I removed half the soil. I'm going to replenish it with some nice, clean, nutrient-filled soil. That way it will give these nice fall plants an extra boost and keep them going until the hard freeze. Okay, now we are ready to see what's going to look good in this pot. I think we have to have this one.
Make sure you tease the roots before planting. Start with the largest plant first. In my case, it's the Rudbeckia, which is perfect for the center. Then just start packing in the plants, keeping the trailing plants like the ivy on the outside, and don't forget to tuck in more soil around the edges, being sure to cover the entire roots. Now, as you can tell, I love mixing yellow and purple.
Okay, now that I've made a complete mess of the sidewalk, that's okay, because look what I get in return. At this point, what we need to do is water the pot well and keep it watered when it needs it. Forget about fertilizing. The plants just don't need it at this point of the season. Now, this is just one look, but let me show you some others we created.
Here's a small terracotta pot filled with ornamental kale, mums, and dusty miller. Or how about this cute wooden basket of low-growing violas, pansies, and asters? And don't forget about window boxes. This combination of asters, autumn joy sedum, and violas looks great. And finally, who can resist a large bushel basket brimming with yellow mums, Rudbeckia, and ornamental grasses, which add height and texture to any fall container.
Oh, and one final thing, you'll want to continue pinching back the flowers to encourage more blooms. These will continue going right through the first hard freeze. And let me tell you, with the flowers that I showed you today, even Mother Nature is going to have to put up her dukes in order to wipe these babies out.
Hello everybody, welcome to the show. Who would have ever thought that you could take a container like this and change it into a beautiful planter like this? It's called trough gardening, made popular back in the 1930s. Stone troughs used to water horses were later transformed into these beautiful containers. Well, as you can imagine, the look stuck and is now hotter than ever. Well, today I'm going to show you how you can create your own trough container in any shape or size. The first thing you need is a form. Now, just about anything will work as long as it's sturdy. A plastic crate or even a wooden box like this one here that we put together. Inside the form, you need to line it with plastic, saran wrap, or if you have dry cleaner bags, even bubble wrap. This gives that nice rough texture on the outside of the trough container. Now, the ingredients are easy. There's only 3 of them, and you use them in equal parts. Peat moss, perlite, Portland cement. The peat moss and perlite can be picked up at the garden center, and just make sure that you get rid of all the lumps in the peat moss. At the hardware store, you can pick up the Portland cement, and while you're there, don't forget to pick up some chicken wire. This helps reinforce your container. Then be sure to pick up gloves and a mask. This will prevent you from breathing in the dust while you're mixing. Speaking of mixing, you'll need a tool to do that. A shovel or a spade will be just fine. Well, you ready to get to work? Let's go. When measuring the ingredients, be sure you add equal parts of peat moss, perlite, and Portland cement. In that order is best. I put in 2 gallons of each ingredient. The amount varies depending on the size of your mold. A wheelbarrow is great for mixing everything together. And even though you're protected by the mask, be sure you work in a well-ventilated area. The dust particles will fly as you continue stirring. Now, before you add water to the mixture, it's real important to make sure your form is ready to go because you won't have a lot of time. So what you need to do is take your plastic bags, whatever you're using, tie knots, just make it a gnarly mess, and line the sides of the form with these bags. And of course, this is going to help give it a nice texture and also give some indentations. You want to leave the bottom flat. Don't cover that. That'll help the pot sit up. Then take the bubble wrap with the bubbles facing the walls of the form, lay them over the plastic bags. Okay, now this is ready.
The key to adding water is to do it slowly, a little bit at a time. Blend the water in with the dry ingredients until the moisture holds it together. You'll find that this mixing part gets very tiring, so you might want to invite a friend over to help. I invited Rod Johnson, who just happens to specialize in making trough containers. Now, if the mixture is too crumbly, add more water. When the texture has a cottage cheese-like feel, it's time to begin shoveling it into your mold. As quickly as possible, it's important to firmly press the cement mixture into the mold. Otherwise, the indentations from the bubble wrap won't show up on the outside of your planter. Once the mold is about 3/4 full, place chicken wire into the cement on the bottom and on the sides. This will reinforce the structure of your finished container. Then add the rest of your mixture into the mold. And don't forget to poke in a couple of holes for drainage. Now, after 3 to 5 days, gently remove the mold from its form. And if you have any sharp edges with a putty knife, just come through and remove all of those. Now, you can see on the side how we've got all these nice indentations. That's because of the twisted plastic. But if we want this to look like a natural stone, then we're going to take some Portland cement and gently rub this into the sides. Now, once you've completed that, you don't want to plant in this yet because there's too much lime. You need to leach that out. So take this outside, let it sit for 3 to 5 weeks. If it doesn't rain, you'll want to hose it down every couple of days, and then we're ready to pot it up. To protect your plants from disease, use sterilized potting soil rather than soil from your garden. Small flowering plants like pansies look great, but there's also the alpine look. Or just use slow-growing plants that have similar needs and adapt well to your climate. Now, don't these look great? By the way, one final tip. If you want your trough container to look as though it's aged with time, simply paint the exterior with either buttermilk or plain yogurt. Within time, moss or lichens will grow on the side. Trough containers, they're hot and they're something you can do. You know, one of my favorite garden pots is one my son Taylor did years ago. Look at this, it's a one-of-a-kind design, and it was a great way to get him interested in gardening. Today I'm going to show you how you can make these designer pots with your children. Well, since it's a kid project, we need kids, and we've got plenty of them today. Now, the ingredients are very basic. We started off with terracotta pots, stopped by the craft store, picked up paintbrushes, some acrylic paints, and really that's all you need. But if you want to get creative, do what we've done. We've made potato prints, we've got sponges, some sand, some stickers. The kids are going to go nuts. All right, you guys, are you ready?
Yeah!
Shall we get painting?
Yeah!
All right, go ahead. Start your pots. Did you guys have fun?
Yeah!
Yeah, show us what you've got. You've done such a great job. A great gift idea for Grandma or Grandpa.
Or a teacher.
A great idea, Zach.
Or a friend.
Yeah. Anyone who gardens knows how wonderful terracotta pots are for your plants. The only problem, the pot may not match your interior decor. Jean Iverson, who specializes in interior design, is going to show us how to change a plain pot into a work of art. So, Jean, I'm very excited to see how we can take this very plain terracotta pot and achieve a lot of different looks. What are we going to do?
Well, Rebecca, with distress decor so popular these days, I'm going to show you two different ways to do that. One using the crackle method and one using the patina method.
Great. Let's start with the crackle method.
Okay, all you'll need is 2 different types of paint. This is craft acrylic paint. You'll need one for your base coat and one for your top coat.
And you pick these up where? The
Craft stores.
Okay, so you got those, but what gives it that crackly appearance?
Well, then you need crackle medium, and this is a glaze that you'll put on in the middle of your process. And this you can purchase at paint stores.
Okay, well, let's get started.
Okay, you'll take your base coat color. This is the color that your cracks will be. And you'll simply brush it on your pot.
Okay, so we got a little bit this here.
As you paint on the base coat, make sure you thoroughly cover the entire pot. Remember that this first layer will be the color of your cracks. It doesn't have to be white, but it's best to choose a color that contrasts your top coat. After letting the paint dry for about a half hour, brush on the crackle medium glaze ever so lightly. This is what will cause the paint to crack and give it that aged look. Let this dry at least 1 hour.
Now comes the tricky part. We're going to apply our top coat over our crackle finish. It's very important that you paint quickly and smoothly, making sure that you don't brush over any areas that you've already painted that have dried already. The crackling begins very quickly.
Because this part takes a special technique, Jean demonstrated while I watched. Now notice how she takes tiny brush strokes when painting on the top coat. This is important because you don't want to overlap the paint or it will lift off the previously dried paint and the crackle look will not appear. Now if you do this correctly, your pot will take on a beautiful rustic appearance.
Now, after about an hour, this is what it looks like. Are we finished at this point, Jean?
Apply an acrylic sealer on the inside of your pot and the outside, and you're through.
Great, I like that technique. The next technique is the patina. We've taken a terracotta pot, applied a teal-colored acrylic, and I see you've got more paints there.
Right, you'll need 2 additional colors. You'll need a dark brown and a moss green.
And what are those colors for?
These colors help us achieve the aged look of copper or a patina finish.
Oh, good. Can you show us how it's done?
Right, let's begin.
The key to the patina method is removing excess paint from your sponge, then blotting it lightly onto the sides of the pot. Add pressure gently to give depth where it's needed. By mixing the 2 colors of dark brown and yellowish green, the pot will take on a look of oxidized copper, which is called patina.
Here, Rebecca, why don't you give it a try?
Okay.
Just work on that top edge, pushing and tamping.
Okay, now this looks like it's kind of missing something.
Well, now you can add a wax metallic finish. This is an easy waxy rub that you merely apply with a cloth.
And it's gold. Oh,
and
I
it's gold.
see.
It's very
and
pretty.
it really gives it
Goes
that
on
patina
nice.
finish.
Right. And it also highlights your pot, too.
Yeah. Once you've painted your pot, there are so many different things you can use them for. Here we've added a gift container, put in a plant. How about dried flowers? This one works great for a candle. Or how about something a little whimsical? Paint a pot, get creative. You'll be surprised what you'll come up with.
It's every gardener's dream to have a big pot of flowers spilling over the edges. Well, in this case, the flowers are really spilling. This is what I call a pot in a pot in a pot and maybe one more pot. It's a very fun project, and I gotta tell you, when people visit my garden, they're always talking about this pot of flowers. Let me show you how easy it is to make. Okay, so here's what you need. First of all, a variety of different sized pots. It's important that each pot can fit inside each other, like this one here, and you want to make sure you allow extra room because that's where the flowers go. You'll need a good potting soil, some soaked sphagnum moss, a variety of flowers. The first step is to take the largest pot and fill it about halfway with the potting soil. Okay, now that you've got that, we want to make a well in the soil, pushing it firmly against the sides. And then we'll take some sphagnum moss and line the bottom and the sides with the moss. This is going to help cushion the next pot as we place it inside and hold it in place. Okay, now this looks good, and keep in mind you may have to add a little bit of soil just to get it level. And notice how I'm pushing this top pot against the back, because remember, the stack of pots will be laying in the grass like so. All the blooming flowers will come out of top, so we really don't need a lot of space down here. Now we're ready to add soil to the next pot. Again, you want to fill it halfway full. Okay, now we're ready for the plants. And keep in mind, you want to make sure that all the flowers have the same light and water requirements. I'm putting this in the shade, so I've selected plants that will grow well in the shade. I'm going to start off with the base, and I'm using the larger blooming flower since the pot is bigger. Here I've got a beautiful tuberous begonia. I'm going to squish the root ball like so. Try to keep the root ball intact when squishing it to the right size. Then wrap the roots and soil in sphagnum moss. Then gently wedge into place. The moss does a couple of things. It helps retain water while keeping the plant's roots in place. Also, you'll notice we're going to have a couple of holes. You'll have to fill that in with a little bit of soil and more moss. Okay, so that's basically the concept. Now what we want to do is bring in the rest of the plants, fill up the pots, and then we're ready to tip them over. Let's go. All right, now the flowers are in. Let's give them a good long drink. Okay, now we'll move the pot into position. It's a little heavy. Very carefully hold the back and slowly drop it down. And there you have it, plants spilling all out of the pots. As far as watering and fertilizing goes, it's a good idea to put a slow drip over the top so that it absorbs the moisture. And if you mix in some time-release fertilizer, you won't need to do a thing. I amended my soil, so my plants should be fine. Now I think we better go in before the rain comes. You know plants are coming out of their winter slumber when you start to see new green growth. This is an indication that the plant is hungry and ready to be fed, and it might be ready to move up into a new home. Now, repotting your houseplants is essential if you want healthy plants. It does a couple of things. First of all, it allows you to replenish the soil. And secondly, in this case, we've got a root-bound plant. This is an indication that this plant needs a larger pot to grow in. Now, the rule of thumb when selecting your new pot is that it's only one size larger than the original container. This one has good drainage, that's a must. The next thing you want to do is get a good quality potting soil. You can pick it up at the garden center, and you want to start off by adding about 2 inches to the bottom of the pot. Okay, now we're ready for the plant. But you don't want to put it in with the roots looking like this, otherwise they'll just grow in circles. What we need to do is loosen up the roots, and you can do that with your kitchen knife just by scoring the sides. And finally, fill the pot with the rest of the soil. Water it only when it needs it, about once a week, and then you've got to feed it to keep the plant happy. I like to use a diluted fish emulsion about every other week. So you want spring bulbs, but you don't have space in your garden. Well, why not grow them in pots? Here's what you need: bulbs, various containers, and soil. You're set to go. All types of blooming bulbs can be planted in pots, whether it's grape hyacinths, daffodils, or tulips. Now, while we're used to seeing these spring flowers in the ground, you'd be surprised just how stunning they can be in a container. Now, the size of pot you select should correspond with the size of flowers you intend to grow. For instance, for the tallest flowers like the daffodils, you'll want to select a large pot, something that's at least 18 inches wide. Most of your tulips will do just fine in 14 to 12-inch pots. The Dutch hyacinths, you'll need an 8-inch pot. And for the smallest bulbs, the ones that grow about 3 inches tall, like the crocus, the scilla, grape muscari, 4-inch pots are perfect. As far as planting your bulbs, that's the easy part. You do it just like you would have done it in the ground. The only difference is we don't have to dig the hole, so that saves you a little bit of work. Now, I've chosen a large container because I'm going to plant the daffodils here. Now, when you select your soil, rather than taking the potting soil, which is a little too light and airy for the bulbs, select a garden soil. Pick it up at the garden center. That way you know it's sterilized. You don't want to go out in the backyard and dig up soil there. Now, we're going to fill the pot 1/3 full of soil. Once you've added the first layer of soil, sprinkle some bulb food over the top. Now the next thing we do is add the bulbs. And remember, we want a dramatic display, so we're going to pack them in. Now with the daffodils and any of the tulips, remember the basal plate or the rooty part goes down, the points looking up at you. Okay, now the next step is to fill the pot with the rest of the soil and then water it well. Now it's important to keep your bulbs watered through the winter season. And speaking of winter, it's very important to protect the plants from any sudden changes in temperatures. You can do that by adding a layer of straw over the top. Now the most important part of this project is storing the bulbs through the winter. Temperatures need to be between 35 and 45 degrees. Any colder or warmer and the bulbs aren't going to grow. So an insulated garage might be the perfect spot. We'll keep these over winter. Next spring, when you start seeing growth, go ahead and take off the straw and then move them outdoors when temperatures are finally warm enough. We've got ourselves a movable pot that will go and grow anywhere you want them to. Gardening in containers outdoors is hotter than ever, partly because people have found you can make dramatic pots simply by mixing plants. Well, there's no reason we can't have that same drama indoors by mixing a variety of herbs or even houseplants. Now the first thing you need to do is select a pot, and you can see I've got this clay pot. It has some beautiful color to it, some bronze and some mauves. I think it's really nice, and to make this look as sharp as my outdoor containers, I'm going to try to find houseplants that match the pot. I know it sounds silly, but it's a great tip to keep in mind. So I've shopped the greenhouse, and this is what I've come up with. This Dracaena, look at this arrowhead with the bronzy color. I've got some ivies, croton, and the prayer plant. Now before the plants go in the pot, you want to make sure you check for the plant's drainage. This has a hole, so it's going to be just fine. If the container doesn't have a hole, it's a good idea to line the bottom with a ½ inch of charcoal. Now we'll just fill the container with a good potting soil. We want to fill this about 3/4 full. As you combine different houseplants, keep those with similar lighting and watering requirements together. The plants I've chosen all need medium light with average moisture, so I wouldn't want to put a cactus or a succulent with this collection. If some plants need less water than others, try to plant those to the outer edges of the pot. And a couple of other things, just like planting outdoor containers, you want to think about texture. You can see I've got a lot of spiky plants here, so I'm going to counteract that with foliage that has smoother leaves and an oval, rounder, softer shape. We want tall plants, we want some filler plants, and we also want plants to hang over the side. These are called trailing plants. And for that I'm going to use this ivy. The color in the ivy, you can see this kind of limey green, picks up the same color in the prayer plant. And when this goes in, you can see how it just beautifully softens the side of the container. Now once you get the plants in place, it's a good idea to fill in around the edges with some soil. Okay, now we'll give them a good drink, and keep in mind you'll want to water the plants when the soil is dry to the touch, which might be once a week, and just don't overdo it. That's the #1 reason that plants die. As far as fertilizing is concerned, you only want to fertilize them during the growing period, which is typically early March to around the end of September. All you need to do is dilute the fertilizer at half strength into the water. Now, if you do everything correctly, which I know you will, eventually your plants are going to grow beautifully and will outgrow the current container. At that point, you have two choices. You either have to transplant them, or you can root prune the plant, put it back in, and that will help maintain its size. One of my favorite floral designers is Derek Gagliardi. We use him a lot for many of the projects, but I got to tell you, you have outdone yourself on this one. What a great idea. How'd you come up with this?
Thank you. Well, we are, of course, known for our fresh flowers, but more and more people are getting into gardening, and so we get a lot of requests for plants. And one of the things that we've designed here is a perennial garden planter, and you can see that we've used a nice selection of colors and textures, and these things are all going to work really well together.
So this would be for the new homeowner.
Exactly.
Oh, this is is a fabulous idea. Now tell me about this one.
This one is a succulent garden. It's very, very low maintenance. Hardly ever have to water.
So indoor?
Indoor.
Or outdoors?
Can go outdoors in the
Yeah.
summer, but it would have to come in the winter.
And not only the collection of plants are great, but you've done some great architectural things here that I
Yeah.
really like.
This is very dynamic in using sticks to create a structure and then putting the terracotta
And it's real
pots onto
simple.
it. Very simple.
These are very simple.
Very simple.
You're going to show us how. What's the first thing we
We'd
need
love
to do?
We're going to have planters. Okay. We're going to have a selection of plants, and we're going to need some sticks.
The nice thing about these gifts, they can be tailor-made for the recipient, so be sure to plant to their personality.
Now, the garden we're going to create is an herbal garden that can be grown either indoors or outdoors. We've got a selection of herbs,
Yep, we've got a
pot,
great pot.
and you filled this
We
up
filled
with...
this with newspaper because that's going to just raise the level so that when we put the plants in, they don't sink down into
Okay, and we start by just packing the plants.
Yeah, we just put whatever you want.
Okay, and I notice these are all in peat pots, but
Yep.
that's not how you buy the plants.
No, when you buy the plants, they're going to come in plastic containers, much like this one. And then we're going to want to take them out of there and put them down in. I just think it's nice because it's more aesthetic. And you
Yeah.
can also plant them in these and they will grow just fine.
Oh, that's nice, and it's one less thing that your friend has to worry about.
As you put them into the container, you're going to also want to think of in terms of design. And in order to add height, you can put styrofoam or more newspaper.
Okay.
The nice thing about the styrofoam is that it's going to allow us to take the herbs.
Now you just got, that's just a little stick that you just stuck in the bottom.
Yep. And put them in on an angle. So
Oh.
you can create a little bit more
Yeah,
playfulness
I like that.
within the
Okay,
arrangement.
let's see one of those sticks. I'll do that. And you want to keep the colors kind of together.
Yeah,
things
the
that
textures,
match.
vary the colors and the textures. Maybe put the
Okay.
heavier leaves.
Okay.
This is going to drape down over the front really nicely. Got some wheatgrass.
And we just pack this in.
Yeah, and then when we get done, we can put a little moss over the edges to hide the mechanics. And then we're going to create an arch out of branches. Come up and around, and we're going to attach some color onto it.
Okay.
Start by wedging 2 sticks, in this case we use pussy willow, on either side of the arrangement. Then take some raffia and tie the 2 together at the top. Now to add some interest to the arch, weave in some curly willow. Tie it once again with the raffia. To add a little color to the arrangement, Derek used an old canning jar as a vase.
We're going to fill it with water.
This gives the arrangement that designer's touch.
Okay, so we'll just add the roses.
Oh, that really pops, doesn't it?
Great color.
And you want to add a little
We'll add
ribbon?
some ribbon.
That's nice. And you do that, I'll add some Spanish moss. This is going to help fill in the edges here and just really put the finishing touch. Nice. Whew, we're good. This is going to be a great gift. This watering can was one of the first tools I ever owned. It's watered a lot of gardens, but as you can see, its age is catching up with it, and I don't have the heart to throw it away. So I thought, I'll make this part of my garden. This will make an excellent container for a pot of flowers, and as with any container, it's important that you have drainage holes. Well, I've got that naturally, so I don't have to drill anything in, but what I'll do is I'll add pieces of pottery to the bottom that will prevent the soil from draining out of the bottom. So we'll put in some old terracotta pots that have broken up, then we'll add some soil. Okay, I've got this about half full. Now, the next step, I'm going to add these little crystals. These are like miniature sponges that hold 200 times their weight in water. This will help keep the plant hydrated throughout the hot summer. So I'll sprinkle in some of that. Now we'll add a little bit of time-release fertilizer. Just sprinkle that in. And then another layer of soil that's about 1 or 2 inches deep. Okay, now we're ready to plant. Now I don't have a lot of area here, so I selected 3 plants, the cigar plant, geranium, and this vinca vine, and notice the combinations of red here. This will complement the handle and the spout quite nicely. Now see, isn't this fun? Just need to keep it watered and find a place to put it, and I've got a great set of flowers. When I think of New York, I can almost smell the vendors roasting nuts over an open flame, candied peanuts and cashews. I've tried recipes but never quite figured out how they do it. Well, that is until I found this spicy pecan recipe, and I think it's better than New York.
Now for this recipe, you'll need water, paprika, cayenne pepper, some allspice, sugar, and pecans. The first thing you need to do is add the 2 cups of water to a small saucepan. Then you'll take all the powdered ingredients, pour them into the pan, and stir. Cook the mixture, stirring constantly, until it reaches 220 degrees. The temperature is critical, so if you can, use a candy thermometer. If you don't have a candy thermometer, just watch. You'll notice it will reduce and it will become very syrupy. At that point, we're going to add the pecans. We're just going to cook these for about 5 minutes until the syrup coats the pecans and stays on the pecans. Once coated, transfer the pecans into a pan filled with 1 inch of canola oil, which has been heated to 350 degrees. This will caramelize the candy coating on the pecans, turning it a crispy golden brown. Then immediately transfer the pecans to parchment or paper towels to drain. Okay, and once you've let these drain, you can put them in a nice dish, set them around the house, or they make great gift ideas. So put them in an airtight container and they're ready. And I'm guaranteeing you that these spicy pecans, people will go nuts over them. Whew, that was a lot of information. Hope you got all that down, and I want to see those hands. Well, like I said, if you've enjoyed this DVD, be sure to look for the others. I'm Rebecca Coles. Until next time, keep those little hands dirty.